property, right against trespass from anybody, including the landlord or the house owner, and also the right of the tenant against exorbitant and unnecessary rent increment from the landlord. Unnecessary rent increment, emphasis on exorbitant and unnecessary. In a case where it is necessary to increase the rent, it must not be exorbitant, because it is all of us that are facing the same thing. Which brings us to the next thing I'm going to state here. A succinct provision of 37 on the, this was the tenancy law of 2011. Subject to any agreement to the contrary on existing tenants. Okay, let me start from the beginning. When a tenant's rent is increased arbitrarily without the landlord first consulting the tenant over it, the tenant is to approach the court for the court to declare that the increase in the rent by the landlord is unreasonable. So number one, you have a right to go to court to say, this rent my landlord is bringing is unreasonable. We did not have any, because first it is demanded that the landlord would have a meeting with the tenant, inform them that because of this and this and this, we want to increase rent. And then they would have a negotiation. A landlord, that amount is too much, or we too, we are facing the same thing. Okay, how about we do it like this and like that, so that everybody will benefit, at least we too. And then at the end of the day, after that negotiation, they come to an agreement, and then yes. But in most cases, what we see is you just get a letter. Rent has been increased. Nobody speaks with the tenants first. No, it's almost like the landlords don't care whether there's someone living in the house. The point is, this is my house. If it is your house, you shouldn't have rented it. You should have stayed in there and let it bring money for you. You rented it because it's a business. And like every other business in this country, that your rent house business is estate business is also guided by certain laws. Just the same way every other business has certain laws that guide it in the country. So for houses, I wonder why the landlords try to want to be different. Why they feel it is my house. If he does not want, let him leave. These are some of the comments you would hear from some landlords. So it brings us to this. There first has to be some sort of conversation between tenants and landlords. Now, in the case, according to, like in Lagos State, I think it is well applied, because I was looking at in Lagos State, and in fact, the one on Twitter was the lawyer is in Lagos State, and I've seen many other cases you will find if you start searching. Most of them were in Lagos State, where people had to challenge, this sort of actions, and they came out with the court judgment in their favor, saying, well, you cannot do this thing that way. In fact, there were provisions that even said, because the person does not agree to the new rent does not mean that, the person must have to park. Or some landlord will assume, I have told you this is the new rent, and then you did not leave. That means you will pay the new rent. No, if you want to effect the new rent and you want that person, then the landlord can approach the court and get an eviction notice and follow the other processes to evict that old tenant, so that you can have a new tenant come and pay your new rent. I don't know if that makes sense. Otherwise, you cannot tell the old tenant that entered that house based on the agreement of an old rent to pay a new rent that both of you have not agreed on. So according to that tenancy law 2011, says subject to any agreement to the contrary, an existing tenant may apply, as in form TL11, to the court for an order declaring that the increase in rent payable under a tenancy agreement is unreasonable. So there are also conditions for why the landlord sometimes increase the rents, and we know the most popular one would be economic reality, and that would be something that we're seeing now. An increment of rents, at least some landlords decide to increase their rents every 3 years. But when there's an economic situation, for some landlords who depend on their houses as a source of income, they see it as, well, I have to meet up, so I increase the rent. And that's why I started the conversation from a moral perspective, which we'll get back to after this commercial when we come back. Stay tuned. Nigeria Info. On Facebook again, Nigeria Info 92.3 PH. That's the handle, Nigeria Info 92.3 PH. We're talking about the incessant increase of house rents in Port Harcourt, and we're asking you whether in your own area, what is the rent situation? Has your landlord increased rent? Let us know. Messages have been coming in on WhatsApp. I'll be taking a few of them, but I was trying to educate us on what the law says, and for those who might not know, I'm pretty sure you're learning a thing or two now. There's still a few more things that we'll talk about in regards to that, but first I'll take a few messages on WhatsApp. The numbers again, 0809-030-6416. The phone lines will be coming up shortly. I'm sure a lot of people have experiences and want to talk about the situation in their area. We'll give you that opportunity, but first, let us hear this one. It says, greetings to you. Indeed, Labour just want to test. No. Okay, this one is okay. You're blaming Labour for the reason or for all of this. Okay. Also, was something I was looking at. Does Labour have the powers to decide rent? And amongst the roles of Labour, price control isn't really their duty, but Labour can, and Labour had even said before, if I remember, under the leadership of British Super in Rivers State one time, had said after they had taken care of the worker salary minimum wage problem that time, that it was going to be talking to the government to address the problem of rent, price and cost of living in Rivers State. The Ministry for Urban Planning, well, we don't know who the commissioner would be, but it's also something that should be looked at. Understand also that the rent for buildings differ depending on the areas that those houses are situated. That was why I was shocked when I heard that a house at Rumosi will be costing about 1.something million for a 2-bedroom flat for a year. Okay, no, pardon me, but what did you build the house with? Who is costing? What indices were used to arrive at that particular price? Are you confident that you will be able to rent out that house for 1.something million in the next 5 years when the house has become old and that somebody wants to rent it? You think he would pay 1.something million? This is how most times we fix these prices, because, well, for many people it's a business that they don't understand and they feel they can get back their money in the space of 1 year after building the house, which is not possible, which does not happen. Because if you do that, it means you're short-sighted. It means you're not thinking about what my house will look like in the future, the value of my land in the future. Are you imputing all of that before fixing your rent? Well, this message here says, good morning. Landlords are taking undue advantage of government's failure in housing deficit and lack of proper laws guiding and regulating housing and tenancy. Look at the block of flats lying idle in Transamadi by Madaka Junction for many years and many more all over the state. These could have forced down the cost of rent in Port Harcourt if well harnessed. Bernard from Port Harcourt. I think it's where we should have a proper conversation, and the government, they always listen, and I'm sure some people in government are listening now. But it should be addressed. We should begin to look at putting in place low-cost housing. And I think the fact that the concentration of activities is in Port Harcourt is another problem for why people just put prices for houses the way they want. If we had other cities in Rivers State outside Port Harcourt, perhaps that would help. But it's now still shocking because Romusi is in Obiakbo, and you are seeing rent for 1.something there. I don't know why. So somebody is not doing something with regards to how to manage this. Don't tell me because a bag of cement is 50,000. It doesn't explain it. Because a bag of cement is 50,000, which is, I'm just exaggerating. That's not what it is. Or how much is rod? Do you know how much is rod? You know, all of these things are said. But then you do not even do the required things that you need to do with maintaining the house when you collect those monies. There are houses where the what we call sockaway is leaking, the windows in the house problem, the chambers, and what there are many issues in the house that they don't even, and they just come to collect the rent. The landlords only bother about collecting the rent, and that's it. How the tenants survive, who take care of the activities in there. Some landlords will even tell you, yeah, the one staying here night is you that will take care of it. Meanwhile, you are collecting 1.something million from me for rent. So Everybody has to wake up to their responsibilities. There used to be, I can't remember what they called them, that go about inspecting houses back in the day. I know when then in Warri, we used to see them. They come into our compound, they will inspect, they'll go to your sockaway, they'll look at the structure of the house, everything. So landlords were making sure that after collecting rent, they were doing what they needed to do. I don't think that's the case these days. It's mostly about how much we can make from this house. How much am I going to make? Forgetting that this house will stand for years even after you have died and left. Your children will continue collecting rent. So you think that in 50 years' time, if you are around maybe 50 now, you die. You think that your children will still want to collect 1.2 million. Who would pay it at that time? It won't be the case. And I think some people aren't being very long-sighted with how they invest in this sort of properties and how they do this. Like this message says, taking advantage. This one says, good morning. I'm glad for the landlord God ordained for me or my co-tenants. He has increased the rent just once in the last 8 years. If I say my location, make my data finish. You don't want people to come look for houses in your area. Another person say, I must commend Lagosians who have blazed the trail, fight for the rights of tenants. Honestly, while I was preparing for this conversation, all the time, for every single success you would see with regards to this tenant arbitrary increase of rent and all of that, were all from Lagos. It were people in Lagos that went to court to test. The law said this, sir. Let's go to court and test it. Let us find out, because you cannot just, like I said, from a moral point, it doesn't even make sense. If you're reasonable and you're thinking, how can we say that everybody is cutting their coat according to their cloth? We're all managing. Now, your house is your source of income. Let's paint a picture. Your house, maybe you're a retiree, you're a pensioner. So your house is where you make, that's your source of income. That's your company. Your house is your company. Your tenants are your employee. Or technically, in fact, your tenants are the ones that employed you. Your house is what is paying you. Your tenants employed you because if they don't pay rent, you can't make money. Now, the government has done what it is doing and the economic situation is what it is. Those tenants are also going to that same market. Remember that those tenants' salaries have not been increased. Those tenants' salaries still the same. It hasn't changed. They're not making extra money from anywhere. Some people in a compound that I stay, there are many people that don't drive their cars every day anymore. Because of the fuel situation, we have to now pick when to drive the car and when not. I have a friend that his car has been parked for a while. V6 engine, could tell you say, no be joke. So the car is parked for only when it is absolutely necessary. People are cutting costs to live within the available resources they are getting from their employer as salary. Now, you as a landlord, your own salary comes when your tenants pay rent. Why can't you also try to live within that salary that comes to you, which is via the rent that your tenants pay? Oh, if you think because hours come monthly, then landlords begin to collect monthly rent so that you too can be having money monthly. Because I think this also, the problem with this is also the fact that rents are collected yearly. So the landlords must have finished the money before. So now they need money. So they are looking at whose person's rent is expiring soon. So they'll come and increase the rent so that person will begin to pay, which is also a problem. Okay, let us approve the monthly collection of rent. Nobody wants to agree to that as well. That conversation has come up a lot of the times. Let us pay monthly. There were even tenants that disagreed because, I mean, when you look at the situation of the country. But then, this is the reality. Everybody has to manage from a moral perspective. But legally, I've tried to outline what you can do as a tenant. This one says, my landlord gave me an increment notice last April from 200 to 250. Okay, that's fair enough. If your landlord had improved and he gave you 250, fair enough. At least he told you last year, April, that there was going to be an increase this year. Abi? Not that there was any renovations or upgrade. In fact, part of the fence. Oh, then that one is something you people should ask. Because from the law, you are entitled to, like I was saying, some of these services and the condition of the house. As a tenant, you have a right to demand that your landlord fix these things. It doesn't just increase the rent. If it's increasing the rent, you should show what is changing in the house. What are you doing? Fix these things. It is your house. So it is only sad that we have landlords that would agree that it is their house when they want to collect rent and increase it. But when something is bad, they will say it is you people that live there. You people should take care of it. I'm not the one living with you. It's not my responsibility. That's been two-sided, and it's not what it is. So tenants, you have a right to say, these things are not working. So in your case, last April, 250 is fair. I'm telling you, somebody that was rent was 500. They did not increase it to 550, or they just increased it straight to 700. 700 straight. From where? Pay 500 now is even a problem. How will you not be able to pay the 700? Let's open the phone lines quickly. Good news already is in mouth 3. Good news. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, my brother. Man.
Yeah, go ahead. Please speak up. We can barely hear you.
I took my time to listen to you. And I am from Gumosh, precisely. I'm a Rumosin man. I want you to understand that houses differs. There are someone who comes to build a 1 room, 2 rooms with a toilet and kitchen, no tiling. You don't expect some person to collect like someone who built a well comfortable house, large parlor, large bedroom with a separate room for store. The toilets are very big, large. They have gymnasium inside the house separately. The compound is well tiled, different environment. I expect them to have the same rent. All I done, you mentioned 1.something million. And those ones you're talking about, they even equipped the house, the part of the house, and they have a phone, have kitchen utensils, have the television, everything. Just carry your clothes and come and live. And you want to compare with somebody that is just packing his clothes and come to live. You must consider these things. And besides, again, you must check. That is the business of the landlord. I am the landlord. I don't know how many houses you have. Now, you confirm. The Dangote cement, that is his business. The people doing rice, that is their business. People selling tomatoes, maize, that is their business. How much was the bag of cement last 2 years? How much is the bag of cement today? How much is maize? Common Gary, 2,500 before, now 8,000 naira. And you don't want a landlord man who has his business to increase his own rent. I think you're not fair to us.
All right, good news. All right, then quickly, I think you should also say this. If petrol people who sell petrol at pump price, if they sell, don't complain next time about old stock and new stock if they increase their price the way they do. No, because it's the same thing. There are houses that were built when cement price, a bag of cement was 3,000, 2,800, 2,000, 2,500. Those people are still increasing rent now, and they'll tell you it's because we go to the same market. Good news, I get your point. In Rumosi, let me tell you, those houses, there's nobody that builds a house in Rumosi that puts TV and puts one of the things that influences the price of a house is the location, the environment. If you are building that kind of house, you will not come and build it in Rumosi where you will put swimming pool, put what else? TV according to you, kitchen utensils and everything set, and then. If you want to build that kind of house, you know the kind of tenant you are targeting to get. Even at that, you do not increase your rent arbitrarily. I'm talking about a 2-bedroom flat, a regular 2-bedroom flat. The only thing that the person must have done at the time was put a POP. The house had POP, and then tiling is standard. You tile a house you build. And then, come on. Zion in GRA, good morning. We lost that one. Confidence is calling from Choba. Confidence, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Andrew.
All right.
Okay, my story goes thus. I just recently packed to a compound, I think it's barely 5 months. So one Sunday, the caretaker called me and told me that the landlord has increased the rent. So I later got to find out that she increased the rent.
Oh, goodness me, Confidence. I think you'd have to reach out and call us back. Blessed in Alu. We lost that call too. The point we're trying to make here is it is understandable that landlords who own houses can increase rent, but there are procedures to do that. That's another thing. And now this is from a legal perspective now, not speaking from a moral standpoint. Like Good News was saying, and I was saying, when filling stations were selling 1 naira for petrol, and then all of a sudden they just start selling 15 naira and tell you, and you start to shout, is it not old stock that one is? Why are they selling? It's a business now. That's what we would say, right? It's a business. Now, there are certain businesses that I understand. I told somebody, for transporters, I understand if they increase their prices because they do this business. It's sort of like on a daily basis, which is not like a house. A house is going to be there for years. It's a land that you own years upon years, hundreds of years. It's going to remain there. It's why it's called long-term investments. So even if it is your source of income, it's like say, are you going to say that because you're a civil servant, so you ask the government to increase your money every single time the economy goes bad? The government would give you a reason for why it shouldn't be able to do that. Zion is in GRA. Zion, good morning.
Put this on record. If I can be online for 15 minutes, and when to get to me the network cut, I still call back. It's a serious issue. This morning, my wife woke me up. And look, let us increase the price of our house rent and the cost of plate of food in our business. There is this and that and that. I said no. For the house rent, we are going to reduce it. For the food in our businesses, prices will be normal. Guess what, Andrew? This woman burst into tears as if I was a problem in this life. If it was the Holy Spirit that asked you to bring this discussion, I never thought such discussion would be on radio. And to be honest with you, I've decided we will reduce house rent in Port Harcourt. People that have been paying 5,000 a room is now 3,000. That's what I told them. People that have been paying 200 for self-contained, they will pay 170. One bedroom flat that have been going for 250 will come down to 220. This woman burst into tears as if I've been a bad husband from the beginning. The truth is this. This is the time to prove that we are Nigerians. This is time to prove that we must protect our people against these politicians. I will not be among those. I've told the lawyer, please prepare what a voucher, reduce the house rent. One room that is 1,000. What I'm telling you is not a hidden place in Port Harcourt. It's outrules. Somewhere that some 10 and landlords I won't take in 10,000. And when you brought this conversation, I said to myself, I will area. We will reduce the house rent. We will do that because I am here.
All right,
and
Mr.
I
Zion,
have a voice in this environment.
let's go to Robin in the chair. Hello, Robin. Good morning.
Good morning, Phil Andrew.
Welcome.
The issue of rent in Port Harcourt or other cities, I think there are so many ungoverned places administratively in Nigeria where the government is not regulating and they don't care. And this issue of landlord arbitrarily increasing rent and all that is one of it. Having said so, to be a landlord is not an easy thing. Either the house was built 30, 40 years ago when cement was 500 naira. The same way that cement today is 2,000 plus, that is not easy to build one. But however, we have a bad landlord, we have bad tenants. There is a friend that is a landlord. Each time he goes to demand for his rent, tenants will be threatening him with machete. If you come here again, I will cut off your head and all that stuff. And each time he runs to me, I will advise him, I'm not a lawyer. Go get a lawyer. Make sure the processes with which you want to evict any of them is through the lawful means. If not, as a landlord, you go back or you be on the ground begging. But however, I still want to come in to say that government should come in place. Should not leave the people vulnerable. To build a house is not easy and to rent house is not easy. Every day I pray for those who are paying rent. In this situation, it's a difficult thing. And landlords should show remorse and know that they are dealing with people who tomorrow they must turn to be landlord or landlady.
All right, Robin, thank you very much. Somebody was asking if I own houses. Well, in Bayelsa State, there's a couple of them. That's just to clarify, because somebody was like, so when I'm saying what I'm saying, I understand. But this is what's even very much more important. It is the fact that we're not saying this conversation is basically both sides. And I've also talked about how landlords have certain rights. The essence of discussing this is not because landlords cannot increase rent. It is because landlords have to follow a process to increase rents. It's also that landlords should realize that the people you're increasing these rents for also you are increasing the rent because you are going to a market that you think the prices are expensive. But the people you are telling to pay extra also go to that same market and are faced by the same situation. It's the reason why arbitrary increase of house rents is not advisable. There has to be a conversation. I was trying to explain legally what the position of the law is about this. When a tenant's rent is increased arbitrarily without the landlords first consulting the tenants, this is where it's important. Emphasis, consulting the tenant. If that happens, the tenant is to approach the court for the court to declare the increase in the rent by the landlord unreasonable. The landlord also has the powers to go to court, like in the example cited by Robin now, where you have tenants who maybe you have increased your rent and this person is saying, no, I will not pay. Even after negotiations and everything, says you cannot pay. You now will go to court, as you have the powers to go to court and get the proper eviction papers and processes and get that person out. And then implement your new rent with the new tenant, because you cannot implement the new rent with the old tenant who had signed an old agreement based on the old rent with you, because if he goes to court, he would say when he came to the house, this was the price and what and what. So you have to only evict him and get somebody who's willing to continue with the new rent. But the point is, there are processes. You can't wake up today and increase the rent just like that and expect that people would now start running to make the money because you feel that this is your business. Like I said, every other person also have businesses. So imagine that you increase your rent. What you're telling the person who is a carpenter working with you is that he should increase the cost he uses to make his chair so he can find money to be able to come and pay you. The woman in the market who is also staying in your house would have to increase the money for her food so that she can come and pay you, and then you still go and spend the money. So it's a circle that never ends. And that's why there is the idea of consulting with tenants and having some sort of agreement. Messages on this. This one says, good morning. If the price of an empty land bought 10 years ago increases arbitrarily, what is wrong with increasing rent? If the price of the land, you're not increasing rent. You're not increasing rent because the price of a land increases now. Is that why you're increasing rent? That's not reason. If you go to, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't get a judgment in your favor for that because the land increases. Because if you're saying that, then sell the land and make all the monies that you want to make out of it. I think the emphasis is people to understand that houses, if you're going into the real estate business, is a long-term thing. It's a long-term investment where you're not expected to make all the monies at once. In cases where people have even made all the monies that they used to build their house and buy the land, you still see them increasing rent arbitrarily. Is where we are. Another message here says, good morning. It's quite unfortunate to know that, I'm supporting tenants. I'm not supporting tenants. I'm only saying there is what the law says about how these things should be done. It does not mean you're supporting tenants. You can't imagine when we landlords go through in the hands of these tenants. Some tenants can't even give landlord listening ear because of natural hatred towards the landlord. I mean, that's your emotional and personal issues, perhaps how you guys have been interacting. I'm only trying to explain that legally and from the perspective of the law, this is what it is. And then, even from a moral standpoint, if you put it logically, it's something that everybody should begin to look at. They are bad tenants. Clearly, they are tenants who do not want to follow due process and do what they ought to do. And in those cases, there are steps that landlords should take according to the law to handle it as well. Take an example, the landlord that went to deroof a woman's house because she did not pay rent. That's not how to do it. That's very unlawful. In fact, if that woman had the resources and decides to want to follow the process and test the law, the landlord will pay for that. It is your house, but at the time that she rented it, it has become her space and she is entitled to certain rights. My landlord increased my rent since 2021, but immediately it expired. You must pay the same. No story. Samuel Prosper. Government should take charge and subsidize house rents in Port Harcourt. I think I also mentioned the part of the government coming in, and I'm sure the government is still listening. A lot has to be done. Price control might be very difficult because of the economy, but then what happens to low-income housing and building other cities outside Port Harcourt? We'll be right back.
Do you know who I am? Sure. You know, ask question. I be tornado, a force of nature.